Great. So great to see so many people here, some new faces, some old faces. And there's lots happening, as some of you may know, on Capitol Hill. So let's talk about congressional state of play and where we're at with some of these big bills and what you can do as Franciscan advocates to make sure that some of them pass. So the first thing, Congress actually did something. You probably heard that they passed the $1.2 billion infrastructure bill on a bipartisan vote. And there were 13 House Republicans that voted for the legislation last week. So if any of your reps are on this list, please call them to thank them. It's as much as we like to call them and say, hey, we need you to pass this bill. It's also important to thank folks as well. And these slides will be sent around. So, don't worry about trying to look through to see who has, if your rep is on this list. You will notice that there's a couple who are not running for re-election, like Anthony Gonzalez in Ohio, the famed Ohio State wide receiver, if you will. That's how I know him. And also Adam Kinzinger, who of Illinois, who's been a vocal Trump opponent. So one question people might be asking, well, why did the squad, and we know who the squad is, right? That's AOC and her friends. Why did the squad vote against it? Well, they wanted to make sure that the infrastructure bill and Build Back Better, as what BBB is, were voted on at the same time. So Congress did something. We got that infrastructure bill, but now we need the Build Back Better plan. So the latest I heard, they keep taking pieces out of this Build Back Better plan to appease some moderates. Yes, I see, Nora, you're raising your hand. Do you have a question?
I do. I'm going to interrupt you real quick. One, just clarification. It's $1.2 trillion, not billion.
Thank you. Trillion.
And also, can you just briefly explain what's the difference between infrastructure and Build Back Better? Because I honestly get those confused.
Yeah, so there's lots of different parts that are in, because they're huge bills, right? It's not just 1.2 billion, thank you, it's 1.2 trillion. Build Back Better keeps getting scaled down, but there's climate provisions in Build Back Better, which the last I heard was that those provisions are safe. They're talking about, I can tell you more about what they've taken out of Build Back Better, because that's what you hear more about. You hear more about how there's not paid family leave in there, or childcare, or paid community college. Those are the pieces that have been taken out. They tried to include a pathway to citizenship, but the Senate parliamentarian said that that wasn't allowed, although they can overrule the parliamentarian if they want. So Build Back Better is it's a giant plan that encompasses so many different pieces of the social safety net. And a lot of people are saying, well, how do we pay for that? Well, it's pretty easy. We tax the rich. And I think a lot of people get nervous because they think, oh, am I part of that 1%? I can promise anyone on this call they're not on. They're not part of the 1%. I hate to break it to you, Jim. I'm glad you like that one. But in case anybody was wondering, it's the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses of the world. They alone could, and their corporations could pay for this bill. So the trick is that Congress is out this week, and they'll be back next week, but then they'll be out again for Thanksgiving, and they need to pass a budget. They kicked that can down the road. It's going to expire again on December 4th. And I've heard that we might also see action on the debt ceiling and the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. So there's lots of big bills that are going to come up in a short amount of time. And, we need to make sure that Build Back Better stays at the top of the agenda. Again, there's some key legislators that if you are I know that Nora is in Virginia's 7th district. So please, if no matter who your representative is, but especially if you're in one of these 7 districts, take action, call your rep and tell them to pass Build Back Better. And I'm just going to say that number out loud, 888-738-3058. There's a couple additional ways to, and that number's through our friends at Network. There's a couple additional ways there to reach out through some of our Jewish partners and from Interfaith Power and Light. But as always, phone calls, they are important. So what about democracy? Some of you know that that's an issue that I focus most of my time on. So yes, Nora, question?
Sorry, Jason, how often should we be calling? Like, what's really effective?
Yeah, I would say as much as once a day. You could call every day if you want. And if, there's typically a DC office and then maybe even one or more district offices, call multiple numbers. I've done that before sometimes too. I often like to call after 5 o'clock so then I can just leave a message and don't have to worry about talking to anyone, and I can make sure that I get my point across. So there's different ways to do it. But, if it's once a week, if it's once a day, don't be afraid to pick up that phone. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So, like I said, I work a lot on democracy bills. Some of you might know that the Senate voted on a cloture vote for the John Lewis Voting Rights Act last week. Cloture vote, it's not a vote to even pass the bill. It's just a vote to discuss and debate the bill. So we had one GOP senator, Senator Murkowski from Alaska, who voted yes. So with the filibuster, we need 60 votes just to bring the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to a debate. Now, things have greatly changed. You probably know that there's 400 voter suppression bills that have popped up in state legislatures. There are 33 that have passed in 19 states. And this is just another issue that's becoming divisive and partisan, because in 2006, the VRA was reauthorized 98-0, and it's been twice, different provisions have been stripped by the Supreme Court. And sort of its companion bill, the other bookend, if you will, the Freedom to Vote Act, which is the latest iteration of the For the People Act, was also brought down along party lines. So the Senate is refusing to act at a time when we're seeing new statewide maps. I'm sure Jim in Cincinnati has seen those Ohio and some of the other Cincinnati folks, those Ohio maps that are in the state legislature this week. So there's gerrymandering, and that has happened in the past by both parties, but we're seeing it right now in many states. And the only thing that's going to stop these gerrymandered maps and to stop these statewide voter suppression laws and bills that are popping up in all these states is to pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And again, we're on a short timeline. So I mentioned the filibuster. What about the filibuster? Well, for voting rights specifically, we've reached the end game. So, we're not, I don't think, unless Senator Manchin has 9 more votes up his sleeve, going to reach 60 votes to get the voting rights legislation passed with the filibuster in place. So Senators Schumer, Kaine, Tester, and King are having family discussions about this filibuster. These guys will probably take the lead and figure out how to get to the majority vote, meaning finding a way to pass democracy legislation with only 50 votes. And this is an inside game, and the solution will be whatever our friend Bill Manchin is comfortable doing. So what about Senators Manchin and Sinema? Well, lots of folks are saying to me, well, can I call Senator Manchin? No, please don't, unless you are from West Virginia and have that 304 area code. He should only hear from folks in the Mountaineer State. But it's worth pointing out that in 2011, he voted to amend the filibuster twice. He seems open again to perhaps a talking filibuster. And no one seems to know anything about Kristen Sinema. So, Rosemarie, you met with Representative Gosser's office. What about your senator? She doesn't seem to like to talk to the press too much. No one really seems to know what she's going to do, but has always followed the money. She's taken over $750,000 from Big Pharma, and Joe Manchin collects $500,000 every year from coal stocks dividends.
There is a group in Arizona which is actually making phone calls and transferring you to Sinema's office, asking her to take away the filibuster.
That's great. That's great.
So there are people who are calling other people to do this. The coalition was working more with the House because of the bill for the BBB bill in the House, and we were trying to get stuff passed there. So I'm sure most of us are talking to our senators and congressmen about democracy and the freedom to vote. But I will put out an email to our group and ask them to maybe put a call into Sinema and ask her to support the Freedom to Vote Act.
Yeah,
when it comes up.
That's great. Thank you, Rosemarie. And she supports the Freedom to Vote Act, right? She voted for it. The trick is we need to make sure that nothing stands in the way of getting it passed.
Yeah,
so
well, we want to ask her to support the end of the filibuster,
right, exactly,
especially on voting rights legislation.
You got it. So if you're not in Arizona like Rosemarie or in West Virginia, and I'll mention too that our Faithful Democracy Coalition has done plenty of work with faith leaders on the ground in West Virginia, which is really exciting. There are other ways to get involved. This week, it's the Freedom to Vote, Time to Act Week of Action. So there's actions in over 70 cities. Common Cause, one of our good governance partners, is holding daily phone banks on the Freedom to Vote Act. So that means that you might not be in West Virginia, but you can call someone in West Virginia and say, hey, can you give a call to Senator Manchin? They're doing some other states as well. For those of you in DC, join us in front of the White House next Wednesday, November 17th. I know there's a number of you on this call from DC. I hope you can join us. This will be our 5th action in front of the White House. We're encouraging President Biden to do everything he can to encourage the Senate to get these democracy bills done. So two big bills, the Build Back Better Act, and then these democracy pieces of legislation that need to get passed in a really short timeline, but there's plenty that you can do to help us to make sure that happens. So I think that is it from me. There is, of course, the fan information and the information to get a hold of me. Does anyone have any questions?